Welcome back to the Agent Roadmap series. This particular season is from 0 to 25 transactions. This episode is specifically about time management. As an agent, when you're in this season of your business from 0 to 25 transactions, focus is critically important because as an independent contractor, nobody's kind of standing over you and telling you what to do and providing you with structure. And as such, it's incumbent upon you to create that structure for yourself. And the reason why structure is so important is because it allows you to focus. Okay. And I'm sure you've heard, where focus goes, energy flows. That's true. If I'm unclear on where to be dedicating time, energy, and effort and resources, then I will become a statistic, right? There's a reason why 70% of all real estate agents within their first year of getting licensed and getting into the business are out of the business within 12 months. And in my opinion, it's because of focus or a lack of focus and perhaps a lack of guidance in terms of what to focus on. And without focus, it does lead to failure. It also leads to mediocrity. I believe that's also part of the reason why something wild, like 60, 70% of agents do about 4 or 5 transactions all year long. Right. So the vast majority of agents aren't doing that many deals, and a small proportion of them are. And if you want to be in that small group of the fantastic few, not the mediocre many, getting clear on how to allocate time is critically important and where to focus time, energy, effort, and resources. As we discussed in episode 1, the job of a salesperson is to be in the presence of prospects. This really needs to inform our decisions around how to allocate time, right? Because that's a truth. It is a truth of sales that if you're in the sales business, your job is to be in the presence of prospects. And it is the only way that you get compensated. And that's a major mental map, right? So as an agent, you basically get paid to do 4 activities, right? The first activity that you get paid to do is to prospect, right? Second is to do lead follow-up. The third is to go on appointments. And the fourth is to negotiate deals. And that spells out an acronym, PLAN, prospect, lead follow-up, go on appointments, negotiate deals. And if our job is to be in the presence of prospects, which it is, and if we only paid by our ability to execute in those 4 areas and the amount of time that we spend in those 4 areas, if your goal and objective in getting involved in real estate is to make a meaningful amount of money, then 80% of your time should be spent in PLAN. Prospecting, lead follow-up, go on appointments, negotiate deals. And these activities, they're income-producing activities, right? And there's a key difference between income-producing activities and income-servicing activities. So income-producing activities lead to revenue. Income-servicing activities are activities that you engage in to service the business once you bring it in. And most agents aren't clear on that distinction. And they actually think that the income-servicing part of the business is what they get paid to do, when in fact, that's not actually accurate, right? What's more accurate is that what you get paid to do is to be in the presence of prospects, prospect, lead follow-up, go on appointments, negotiate deals, right? And we can always hire people to help us with the income servicing part of business. And because of that false misperception that most agents have, they end up spending 80% of their time in income servicing activities and only 20% or less of their time in income producing activities, right? So the ratio's off. And as a result, they don't do that many transactions. Another major mental map that you have to get clear on, and by the way, what I'm doing here is I'm setting the stage for having the conversation about time management. We're providing you with the frame on how to think about it, right? So that first mental map is that you're paid to be in the presence of prospects, and that PLAN, that acronym, and 80% of your time should be spent there. The second mental map, which is the frame around this discussion about time management and how we can deduce what makes the most sense and what's the best schedule for us to follow, is this idea of a value chain. And every business has a value chain, okay? An analogy that I like to give people regularly is the example of a doctor's office. We've all been to a doctor's office. We can all relate to that. And when you go to the physician's office, the question is who's the first person that greets you? Is it the doctor? No. It's an administrator, right? An assistant who's at the front desk. And what's the first question they ask you? Yeah, maybe if you have an appointment. What's the second question that they ask you? How are you going to pay for this? Is this going to be cash or do you have insurance, right? Then they hand you, used to be a clipboard, now it's an iPad. And they ask you questions, right? Where does it hurt? How long does it hurt? Do you have a history of it hurting? Do you take any medications? All that. Then you hand them the iPad back and they say, yeah, the doctor will be with you shortly, which is not true. You end up waiting 20, 25 minutes, right? Then do you see the physician? No. You see the physician's assistant or the nurse practitioner. Yeah. And they look at that iPad or their own iPad, which has the information, on it that you just put in. And they weigh you, you pee in a cup, they bang on your knee, they ask you a few questions, follow-up questions based on the questions that they have that you answered on their iPad. You say, okay, great, the doctor will be in with you shortly, which is also not true because you wait another 20 minutes. And then the doctor blows in and he or she looks at the iPad and all the information, says, okay, great, looks like this is what's going on. And they proceed to do an examination. So the first thing they do is they touch you here, and that's a bill. Then you go, and that's a bill. And then they look into your eyes, and that's a bill. And then they look into your ears, and that's a bill. They touch your abdomen, that's a bill. They write a prescription, that's a bill. And then they say, hey, we want to see you back here in 2 weeks. That is a value chain. Now, here's the question that I have for you. Which step in that value chain is valued activity? Is it the receptionist that greets you? Is it the nurse practitioner? Or is it the 10, 15 minutes that the physician spends with you? It's the 10 or 15 minutes that the physician spends with you, because that 10 or 15 minutes, and I know this because both of my in-laws are retired physicians, a family practitioner sees 15 to 20 people per day in that way. And that 10 to 15 minutes that they spend with those 15 to 20 people per day, 5 days a week, is so valuable that it pays for all of the staff, all of the bookkeeping, and it allows for it also pays for the rent, for the building, right? And the facility, the operational expenses, and it allows there to be a profit. Okay. So again, key critical mental map, all businesses have value chains. So the question becomes, is as real estate agents and salespeople, which is what we are, what is the highest valued activity that we could be spending time in? What's doctor work? And it's funny because whenever I share this with agents and my wife is in the room, she always politely and gently reminds me, like, hey, you're not a doctor, Aaron. And I always look at her and say, babe, I'm a doctor of selling. Right? So what's the doctor work? And what I would suggest to you is that our business is no different than, let's say, a physician's business. And our doctor work is prospecting, lead follow-up, go on appointments, negotiate deals. Those activities are what allow you to pay for rent, pay for your car, keep the lights on, invest money, all of that, right? And for there to be a profit left over, at the end of the year. It's critical that you get clear of this value chain. And I know a lot of people want to fight me about it, but it doesn't make it any less true. And I can tell the strength of somebody's schedule based on the outcomes it produces, right? So we just discussed these two mental maps, and these provide the frame with which to have the conversation about how to allocate time and what you should be spending your time doing and what your schedule should look like, okay? Because remember, you have to provide the structure for yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. Structure equals focus. And where focus goes, energy flows. And focus at this stage in this season from 0 to 25 transactions is critical. It's the difference between ending up a statistic or being mediocre or being part of the fantastic few. Okay? Clear. So I can tell the strength of a schedule based on the outcomes it produces. So if you're watching this, just ask yourself a question like, okay, do I have a schedule or do I just wing it? And what outcomes does it produce? Well, if it's not producing really awesome outcomes, then it's probably not a great schedule, and it probably lacks focus, and it's probably not in alignment with the value chain. So our schedule should reflect our understanding of these truths, right? And truths in business are like gravity. So the environment might change, but gravity stays the same. This idea of a value chain and plan and focus, like these are gravity, right? And our schedule should reflect our understanding and be in alignment with what's true, because the way it works in nature is when you go with what's true, you get rewarded. If you go against what's true, you get punished. Yeah. So let's say we were out, I don't know, and we were going to go swimming and do like an ice plunge or something in a river. Now, if we all sat there and we were like, yeah, we're going to do affirmations and say, I am warm, I am warm, I am warm. We're going to be in that water for like 2 hours. Yeah, what's going to happen is we're going to die of hypothermia. That's what's going to happen. So that's us going against nature. But if we go with nature, let's say we're like, hey, we're going to put on these special suits that allow us to retain heat and this and that, right? Then yeah, like we'll probably be okay because we're going with nature instead of trying to go against it. So another key point is if you find yourself not producing the outcomes that you want, and if we can tell that the strength of a schedule based on the outcomes it produces, we can also deduce that with a high degree of probability, I'm not in alignment with these gravities or these truths about business, about a value chain. We get paid to be in the presence of prospects, where focus goes, energy flows, right? What then would be, with all that being said, all of that was to set a frame to give you context for what I'm about to share with you now, which is what would be the schedule of a top producer, right? What is the schedule for an agent that can go from 0 to 25 transactions in a calendar year? You don't believe that that's possible? I have countless, hundreds, if not thousands of agents that I've helped that have accomplished those goals and objectives, gone from 0 to 25 in a calendar year, right? And my personal production did the same thing, went from 0, then to actually first year from 0 to 17, then from 17 to 50, then from 50 to 75, 75 to 89, 89 to 100, did over 100 deals a year for 10 years in a row, did 200 deals a year twice. Again, you can tell the strength of a schedule based on the outcomes it produces. Okay. So here's the schedule of a top producer. First thing is to wake up with something with a 5 in front of it. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of belly aching around that. At the same time, when I'm on coaching calls with people and they tell me what time they wake up, I'm like, man, you're sleeping in like you're rich. Seems like you're independently wealthy, right? There's a reason why in Benjamin Franklin's almanac, or Poor Richard's Almanac, he said, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. There's truth to that, right? So something with a 5 in front of it, I don't care if it's 5:30, 5, just something, right? And we want to, one of the key reasons why we're doing this is we're treating this like a real job. Part of the reason why there's so much mediocrity in our industry is because people don't view this as a real job. We're independent contractors. Nobody's kind of telling you what to do, sort of thing. And we get into this business because we think it has freedom, when what's actually true is that if you want to be wildly successful and make a meaningful amount of income and an uncommon outcomes, you don't have a choice, man. Like there's no freedom. You have to do certain things at certain times in order to produce the outcomes that you want. Something with a 5 in front of it. Number 2, do something physical with your body. Now, why is this so important? Well, my experience is that fear is a visceral experience, but so is courage. And I need to train courage into my body every day. I think this also goes along with this idea of doing difficult, hard things. It's always fascinating to me that we actually come from, we're descendant from our ancestors. We're stalked by lions and bears and tigers and tribes that were trying to steal all their stuff and take all their, possessions, and disease and hunger. And they figured it out. I mean, that same DNA is inside of all of us, right? That same tenacity, that same persistence, that same grit, that same courage. And we forget that, right? What I'm also aware of is the only way it can be activated is when we challenge ourselves, right? I think comfort, the aggressive pursuit of comfort, causes us to forget that we can do hard things. Something difficult and something with your body is critical, okay? It demonstrates to yourself that you could do difficult things. It demonstrates to yourself that you are the voice, that you are, the one that's guiding the ship. And that, even when stuff gets a little difficult, there might be internal resistance, you can push through it. The next thing that I would propose is to read or listen to something positive or educational for you. The way that I think about this is like, if our body's hardware, our brains are the software. Like let's say you have software like Microsoft Word or whatever, like it's constantly providing you with updates to that software. And if you don't update the software, what happens? Like your current version gets bugs in it and it doesn't function properly. The same is true with us, right? There's a reason in the Bible it says renew your mind. 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, right? So that comes with a particular software, right? If you're out there and you find yourself, trying to augment behaviors, but it doesn't stick, the reason is because you haven't augmented the beliefs behind it. And you haven't augmented your perception of yourself. I personally, what I did at the beginning of my career, because again, my family of origin, beautiful people, doing the best they can under the circumstances that they had at their disposal and with the resources they had at their disposal. At the same time, there wasn't a culture of renewing of the mind. And I knew that I couldn't go to them to ask them the questions of what I wanted to accomplish. So I had to go to others, right? And those others, I don't have to actually have proximity to them. I mean, me and you, like, we are communicating now through, the miracle of, let's say, like YouTube and this platform that allows us to connect with each other. But you could also do that with books, right? Some of the titans of industry or business or psychology or, investing, right? Persuasion. All of these individuals are willing to give you their best stuff. And sometimes it might only cost you $20 or $50 or $100 or whatever it is, right? So I've made that commitment and continue to, pour into myself. At the beginning of my career, I was reading 4 books a month. People say, gosh, that's a whole bunch. It's like, man, you watch more Netflix or you do more entertainment, right? That if you would just to downsize that, cut it in half the amount of time you're spending in other areas, whether it's scrolling or, watching movies or, whatever it is that you're doing, and dedicate 30 minutes a day to reading, you would read 4 books a month. And that's the equivalent, by the way, the equivalent of getting a PhD in a topic is reading 50 books on that topic. So reading 4 books a month, 48 books a year, it's like getting a PhD every year, right? You're just constantly renewing and upgrading your software and your mind. The next step is what I would propose in that morning schedule is to write out your goals, both short-term and long-term. My experience is I'll do way more for other people than I will myself. And nobody benefits by you playing small or me playing small, right? Like my family doesn't benefit. My church doesn't benefit. The charities that I donate to doesn't benefit. The benefit by me playing small. So by writing out those goals, both short-term and long-term, you're casting a vision for yourself as to why it is you're doing what you're doing. Because like Viktor Frankl said in his beautiful book, Man's Search for Meaning, oftentimes people come to me and like want to create like this external accountability, which is cool. I don't think it's bad. It just never sticks because external accountability eventually breaks down. And I would tell people regularly, like, look, dude, I don't need to write you a check that if I don't prospect, you'll cash it, because I'm not doing it for you. I'm very clear on what my reasons are. And, continuing to write out goals every single day, short-term and long-term, helps you to stay connected to the reasons why. It also ends up preventing burnout, because people say to me like, oh, like I'm burnt out. And I'm like, well, you're not a candle. That candle's burned out. Like you have the same force inside of you that makes the grass grow and the birds fly and the earth spin around the sun on its own axis at 1,000 miles an hour and then around the sun's axis at 66,000 miles an hour. That's true. Google it. I had to look it up. Right? So how can that force possibly burn out? It can't, right? So usually when we're feeling that burnout, it's because we're not connected to our reasons or our whys. And that's why writing out your goals every day is so important. Okay. And by focusing on the why as well, it helps me to get clear on the opportunity. Yeah, you got to prospect every day. Yes, I have to do lead follow-up. Yeah, I got to go on appointments and negotiate. And it feels like an obligation to them. It's not, it's an opportunity. Do you know how many people would cut off their right arm to be able to sit in air conditioning and go blah, blah, blah? And then when somebody says, yeah, come over, they go in a moving couch that entertains you on the way over, and you can make tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? So by writing out your goals every day, again, it gets you clear on the whys, and it allows you to focus on the opportunity that you have at your disposal versus the obligation, okay? Next thing I would do is affirmations and incantations. Now, I want to be clear, okay? I understand, like the great Jim Rohn said, that affirmation without discipline is the beginning of delusion, okay? So somebody saying like, I'm a great salesperson, and they don't with discipline, consistency, intensity, intention, work on acquiring the skill of becoming a great salesperson, meaning they're role-playing every day, they're writing out scripts, they're chanting, then that's the beginning of delusion. I understand that. I also understand that, again, we can only behave in accordance with the way we see ourselves, right? So, for instance, when I sat down with my first kind of broker, and he asked me how much money I wanted to make, I hemmed and hawed for like 10 minutes, and the biggest number I could spit out was 50,000. And the reason I came up with that number is because at the time, that's what my dad was making. See, that was my kind of mental limit, my thought limit, right? I hadn't been exposed to anything differently. I didn't know anything different was possible, right? And because of that, that's how I saw myself, you see? So affirmations and incantations, they can help me to augment how I see myself over time when matched with discipline, consistency, intentionality, purpose, right? It helps in changing the way I perceive myself. I would have a list of them, I would laminate them, and I would read them out every single day, right? And this is all part of that morning routine. The next thing that I would propose or suggest is role play and practice. This is a skill-based business, no matter what anybody else tells you. So meaning, one of the places where you can get feedback, direct feedback, you want to go to systems that provide direct feedback because you need an accurate assessment of reality in order to produce a good outcome. And in my opinion, there's a handful of them. One of them is nature, right? If you want to see the way things really are, look at nature. Another is economic kind of open markets, right? And you get direct feedback. And from that feedback, I can then augment my approach and continue to refine the approach and get better, right? And by role playing and practicing, like if I'm not role playing and practicing prior to getting on the phone, who am I practicing on or with? Potential clients. Now, does that seem like a mature thing to do? And the answer is emphatically no. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? There's a reason why professional athletes practice for like 100 hours to play like a 4-hour game. There's a reason why. And the same is true here. And these conversations are they're just worth so much money. Like, there's so much opportunity that it seems very immature and foolish to imagine that I can produce this favorable outcome that I wish, whatever that number is for you, if it's 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, $1 million a year, and not put in time, energy, effort, and resources behind practicing the craft, honing the craft, fine tuning the craft. And the question to ask yourself, as it pertains to like role play and practice, is: do I have C+ habits and I'm praying for an A+ life? Do I have the habits of the mediocre many and I'm praying for a fantastic few life? I'm praying for the 1% outcome, and that just doesn't make sense, right? Another way that I like to kind of think about this is when I was, high in production. At one point in a calendar year, I was the top producing listing agent out of in an MLS system with around 20,000 agents. And there was another that was maybe higher, but it was a brokerage, so it wasn't like apples to apples comparison, right? Like as an individual agent listing property. And what I found really interesting when I dug into the numbers a little bit further is out of those 20,000 agents, there were only 100 agents that were doing more than 20 million in volume. Now that's wild when you think about it, despite what Instagram says, right? Despite what people are trying to post and portray themselves as. And I believe that that's true, pretty much anywhere, like uniformly all across the country, those numbers play out. So the question is if I want that job, right? Because you have 20,000 people competing for 100 jobs. So the question is, what would my schedule look like? How would I role play? What would my role play and practice schedule look like? That's why it's a critical component. And again, key mental map: don't practice on prospects. Practice with your peers. If you need a role play group, we have one of those role play groups. You can check out my school account. You can hop into it. It's free. And we'll be there to help you and add value. Now, the next thing on the schedule, now it's time to prospect. So all of that was to prepare us to go out in the world, to ask questions, to find problems that people have that we can be of service and help them with. Okay. And what I would suggest is that starts at around 7:30, 8 o'clock promptly. Right. I remember one of my mentors, this guy named Neil. I've spoken to him every week for 15 years. When I met him, I was doing maybe 50 transactions a year. He was doing 200. Now we kind of triangulate ideas together. And he said something to me. I remember he's like, "Hey, Aaron, like if you want to be a smashing success in this business, I have a formula for you. You ready?" I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. He's like, "You got a pen and piece of paper?" I'm like, yeah, I got it. He's like, "All right, wake up at the same time every day. Then get to the office at the same time every day." I'm like, "Uh-huh." He's like, "Pick up the phone at the same time every day." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Do that for 3 hours every day." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "You do that, you'll be a smashing success in this business." And, don't confuse simple with easy, because that sounds pretty simple, right? And some people can do this job like a day a week. Some people can follow this schedule maybe 2 days a week. There's very, very few that can do it 5 to 6 days a week. And the ones that do it 5 to 6 days a week, they get the 1% outcomes. Okay. They're the ones making millions of dollars a year selling real estate. So what I would suggest is we begin at that 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we go in like 60 to 70 minute intervals, right? Because that's the way our brain works best. If you think about it, like if you've ever sat in a course or a class or something of that nature, or you're reading. Once you get to that like 60-minute mark, what happens? You start to fidget. Maybe I'm hungry. I need to use the restroom. Essentially, what that is your brain telling you that it needs a break, right? Because it's processing all this information. So again, go with nature, go with what's true. So prospect for 70-minute intervals, take a break, have a bite of an apple, do some jumping jacks, maybe read a couple pages of a good book, not like scroll, don't go read the news, don't go check your email, right? And then get back at it. And do this 3 to 4 times. Okay. The goal is to make 25 to 30 talk tos or contacts per day. Okay. 25 to 30 contacts per day, or talk tos, not attempts, talk tos. And if you do that, I promise you, you will again be in, the top 10% of agents in your office, in your geographic area, so on and so forth. Who you're going to be calling during that time frame. Again, we did a previous video to this one, which talks about lead sources. So you can go back and watch that one again if you needed some guidance in terms of where to be allocating time and who you should be reaching out to during this time, right? That we're blocking out for prospecting. Next step in the process is to have a quick lunch, right? Because if we do this, we start at 7:38, that'll take us to like 11:30, 12. And in that quick lunch, it's light. That's another thing, something light. Don't have a cheesesteak with like French fries. Probably want to take a nap after that, right? So something light. And, maybe like 30 minutes, right? So not these long, drawn out 2-hour, 3-hour lunches. Again, like if you had a real job, you wouldn't be able to do that. So don't do that here. Okay. And then from there, we can do like some light admin. That would be the next thing in the schedule. Maybe like 30 minutes, whatever, return some phone calls, check some emails, things of that nature. And then from there, we have a choice to make. Okay. Now notice this is the first time in the schedule that the opportunity to choose something pops up. And as it should be, because what I think for most of you guys is true, if you're honest with yourself, it's all of the choices that you have at your disposal on what you could be allocating time to that leads to a lack of focus. And remember, where focus goes, energy flows. And if I'm not focused, it leads to mediocrity, right? Or it leads to being a statistic. Okay. So for myself and for those that I have the good fortune of, being a guide to, I always suggest to them to eliminate all options until the afternoon. So you don't have to even think about what you should be doing. Okay. And this choice consists of, the 4 P's, right? So the first one is I can practice more, right? You can't practice too much. Okay. Continuing to refine and hone that skill. I made a decision that for me, my skills were going to be a competitive advantage, right? And if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. The next thing, and that practice, by the way, could consist of writing out scripts and dialogues. It could be chanting. It could be videotaping yourself doing a listing presentation. And sending it to a guide or a coach or somebody to review. The next P would be if you have a presentation, a listing presentation, go on it. Okay. The next P is to properties, because at this 0 to 25 stage, your market knowledge isn't like fantastic, right? And the only way to acquire market knowledge is to be in the market. So you can pick out like 3-4 properties in a area, in a particular community, and go and look at them, right? And this will help you in so many different ways. It'll help you to price property better. It'll make you also more credible and believable on presentations because you've actually been inside of properties and you can let them know that, right? And you do that for 6-12 months, like you'll have a really clear picture of the marketplace and what's what. That's part of the value that you provide to clients anyway, is your market knowledge. And then the last one is to prospect more, right? Because what I'm aware of is this 0 to 25 transaction volume is kind of like this ramp up period. You probably don't have too much to do in the afternoon. It's not like you have an appointment every day, right? So it would make sense that if I get paid to be in the presence of prospects and I have nothing to do in the afternoon, then I could just prospect more. And that doesn't necessarily have to be on the phone. It could be texting, it could be sending bomb videos, right? Like video emails to people, it could be going out and knocking on doors. Okay? And those are the options that I have at my disposal. And if you don't have an appointment, it makes sense to do one of the others or all of them, like each and every day, 5 to 6 days a week. And, I know that this sounds like really rudimentary. It can sound rudimentary, right? I don't want you to like just gloss over it though, because time management, like where to focus time and energy and structure and a productive schedule is like 70% of the game, like legitimately, right? It's 70% of the game. anyone, again, as I mentioned, can follow the schedule. Like only a handful of, like, maybe a day a week, maybe a couple days a week. Very few can do it 5 to 6 days a week. And the ones who do that consistently end up getting, the outsized outcomes. And by following the schedule, managing your time intentionally around plan, and, being really, really clear and purposeful about where you're allocating time, you're well on your way to becoming, again, a top producer in your office, being as productive as you want to be in this business, and not becoming a statistic, which is critical, right? I think the primary reason why that happens is because the process of getting a license has nothing to do with actually making money. And these core and key concepts that are like gravity aren't taught, right? So then you just get pushed out into this ecosystem, and very quickly, because there's no salary involved, people end up just kind of selecting themselves out. And sometimes it's not really an issue of like capability or ability or, kind of work ethic. It's just a lack of guidance. And again, that's precisely why we created this video series, this agent roadmap, because agents come to me all the time. I wish I had a map that I could follow. And that's why we're providing it to you. So if you like this episode, be sure to click the subscribe and that little bell button. So that way you're notified every time a new episode comes out. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Agents ask me all the time, they say, Aaron, I wish that there was a place, kind of a series that I could watch that could help me and equip me with everything that I need to progress in my real estate career. After hearing that so many times, I said to the team, hey, we should create something like this on YouTube. So that's precisely what this is.